Well, good day, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Well, on our previous episode, we were out in California. We visited Bob Marshall at Typewriter Muse in Riverside, California, and we spent a few days out on the coast in Santa Barbara. And the other reason for me coming out to Typewriter Muse in Riverside was Bob had invited me to hold a talk and a Q&A session in his Dan Bernstein writing room at Typewriter Muse itself. And so I was really blessed to meet up with a number of typists from the typewriter community, including some that I haven't seen in a while, and also having a Q&A session online, which was recorded by Gregory Short of Type Pals, and Gregory put his recording of that whole Q&A session on his Type Pals channel. But I have also recorded this Q&A session, this talk, and so I present you now my Q&A and my talk at the Dan Bernstein room in Riverside, California with Typewriter Muse. Hope you enjoy it. Well, hey, this is Joe Van Cleve, and I'm at Typewriter Muse, and I've been invited to make a Q&A talk presentation here at the Dan Bernstein room, and this is such an honor. We drove out here and really enjoying Riverside, first time here in the city, and we're going to have fun today with Typewriter Muse and their customers, doing a little Q&A presentation, and Gregory Short of Type Pals should be here to live stream this onto YouTube, we hope. Well, welcome to Typewriter Muse, everybody. I'm Joe Van Cleve, my wife Andrea back there. We just flew in and our arms are tired. No, actually we drove the other day. And it's good to see some familiar faces and some new faces, and Bob has already given us the tour of the shop, and so we might talk about that a little bit later, but Bob invited me to come here for a Q&A and do a little talk and see the shop, and I'm filming some scenes for a YouTube video that I'll put out about Typewriter Muse. But I really appreciate your hospitality, Bob. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We're at the Dan Bernstein writing room, and so we have one typewriter shop in Albuquerque. John Lewis is the proprietor. He's like 81 years old. He's still working on typewriters, but he has a little sales room, tables and typewriters for sale, but he doesn't really have a writing room. And this is pretty special because Bob is doing something that's kind of different from a lot of traditional typewriter shops, which is he's combining a newer business model typewriter shop with kind of trying to connect to the local typewriter community right in the shop, having typing classes and all that. I think that's a really great idea because going forward, you know, as this hobby grows into a movement, into an alternative way of creating, we hope to see more people learning to use typewriters, and it makes sense to have a place to, in this community, that you could be a center of that creative stuff going on. So a little bit about myself. I'm Joe Van Cleve. Hey, take a seat wherever. Hello. I'm Joe Van Cleve, and I am an Albuquerque native. So Albuquerque is this little town in the desert of New Mexico that you might know from Breaking Bad or other TV stuff. But let's see, my great-grandfather came to New Mexico territory in 1903. So we've been there for a while. Dad was a World War II vet. He worked on Sandia Base with the nuclear weapons when I grew up, like a lot of people did. Let's see, my mother died when I was 5 years old, so this would be like 1963 when she died. But a few years before then, my earliest memory of typewriters was I was sitting on her lap at the kitchen table, and she was typing a letter to her mom, my grandmother, on an old black portable typewriter, which I can't remember any more details than that. I think it had round keys. And anyways, I remember she was typing something, and then she wanted me to type, and I think I copied, because I couldn't read at the time, still can't actually, and I just copied her finger pattern. And I think she said I typed part of a sentence, you know what I mean, just from watching the pattern, whatever. And so that was my earliest recollection of typewriters. But after Mom died and my dad remarried and I had a stepmom, I talked to my other brothers. I don't really remember seeing that typewriter in the house after Mom passed away. So maybe Dad got rid of all that. But then the next typewriter that I remember was my oldest brother was going to high school in the early 70s, and Dad bought a new Hermes 10. This is an electric typewriter that's sort of like, you can think of it as an electric version of a Hermes 3000, 12-inch carriage, a little bit different styling, but it's essentially that. We still have it in our family. There's been a video that I did a few years ago about it. And then when I started taking creative writing in high school, I used that typewriter. I think this creative writing class I took, you could write on any subject, you know, and so it was kind of a neat class for a geeky kid like me that had all these weird interests. So I remember one of the big essays I wrote was a 20-page essay on why the rigid airship should be brought back into use, right? Of course I would write something like that, but it was like double-spaced, you know, 1-inch margins, 20 pages, right? And I did it on that electric typewriter. That was kind of fun. Then in the late 1970s, I was in the U.S. Navy, and one of my assignments on the ship, I was on a temporary assignment to another area, and our senior chief had a red Selector 2 in his office. And he let me use it after hours when it wasn't being used for official use. So I was typing up poetry that I was writing on this Selector 2. And when I got out of the Navy in the early 80s, I wanted to keep on typing poetry with a typewriter with a nice, you know, imprint, and so I couldn't afford a Selector, of course. And so I bought a little Smith Corona SE100 daisy wheel, dark gray plastic wedge shaped thing from a store called Service Merchandise. It was a chain store. Anyway, I used that for quite a few years. Somewhere along the way, I also had a medium-sized light gray Royal typewriter with the red Royal badge that pushed in and the ribbon cover popped up. I don't remember where I got that even. But I do remember back by the late 90s, early 2000s, that both of those typewriters were in the storage shed. I wasn't really using or interested in them anymore. But sometime in the mid-aughts, I went to John Lewis's shop and I bought a Royal Mercury. And that's where my interest in, I'd say, the modern interest in typewriters for me started. I was also at the time already blogging, and so I kind of discovered there were these people that were blogging with typewriters. They would type a page, take a photo of or scan of it, and they would put it on their blog. And so I started doing that around 2007 or 2008. And then I remember the summer of 2008 was a very interesting time in the typewriter blogging world because there was all these creative things happening. Like one of the things we started blogging about was taking aluminum foil, a sheet of aluminum foil, put a backing sheet behind it, thread it into your typewriter, and type embossed lettering on aluminum foil in a typewriter. We started doing that. You can use either the ribbon or stencil position, either red or black. It has different effects. Then the other thing we were doing was you take a sheet of paper, you take some crayons, and you make really, really heavy marks. You cover the entire piece of paper with stripes of really dense, waxy color, and then you use that as carbon paper. You put it in a typewriter with a sheet behind it, and you type, and it'll make colored, waxy ink marks on paper, which is another kind of a cool, crafty thing to do. Anyway, that was like the renaissance of typewriter blogging, I guess, was that around that time, 2008, 2010. And of course, when you have one typewriter and you start getting tied into a social group online, you start discovering other people have more typewriters, and then you start looking around in thrift stores and antique stores, and hey, there's back then, that 2012 to 2015 time period, in my town, typewriters were plentiful. They were pretty inexpensive and usually of fairly good quality. They're not that anymore. They're usually what you might call a parts machine that somebody's asking $200 for or something, right? That's what it is now. But back then it was a good time for buying typewriters in thrift stores. And especially helps to have a life partner that was able to put up with my typewriter collecting, and she's right there. So she's still here. So thank you, Andrea, for that. Anyways, along the way, hey Chris, hi. Along the way, I had also started YouTubing mainly because I wanted to document some handmade pinhole cameras and things that I had done photographically. And I did a few of those videos very erratically, and then somewhere, maybe 2014, 2015, I can't remember when, I just all of a sudden decided one day, hey, you have this typewriter hobby and you have a YouTube channel. Why don't you start doing a series of videos on typewriters? So I took 3 of my small portable typewriters out to a city park, set them on a concrete park bench with a camera and a tripod, and started making the first episode of what became the Typewriter Video Series, which is what I call it. And we're up to episode 480 something, I guess, now. But so that's kind of how my YouTube thing with typewriters started. But yeah, I've been a hobbyist for a long time. I've been a dabbling writer, and yeah, I enjoy it. So that's kind of my background in typewriters. When you start gathering a collection of typewriters and you tie yourself into, a social group online of other aficionados, you start learning things like, since none of us are millionaires, you have to kind of learn to service your own typewriters, maybe, or at least do a little bit of maintenance if you don't have a typewriter shop in your area. And I did have a typewriter shop, but Mr. Lewis was backlogged months and months and months, and I had to learn, like when you buy a typewriter from a thrift store, how to check it out, how to test it, that it's basically functional. Does the carriage move? Does the paper release move? Do the margins work? Does the margin release work? Are all the keys intact? You can tell if they're gummy, if the type bars are sticky, you can fix that. But basically, does the carriage move? Does it type? Do the ribbon spools turn? Things like that. Being able to check out the basic functionality and say, okay, it's working cosmetically, there's nothing broken, it just needs to be cleaned and lubricated and serviced. I kind of learned to do that, to be able to, determine if a machine was worth buying or not. And then I learned to, yeah, okay, I can maybe learn to clean things and degrease them, and then you get a little bit more into it. Well, this print's kind of funny, this one letter is off to the left and high. Okay, we can learn to reshape, reform type bars. And eventually, I got a set of old typewriter tools, including a type bar bender, and that really is cool, to be able to do more of the reshaping of type bars as they're needed. So anyways, that's part of the hobby of being a maintenance person, learning to do your own maintenance. So I had a friend, so I started type-ins in Albuquerque in 2017, because I started seeing them happening around the country. And I didn't really have anybody to help me, so I advertised this to the local paper and to some of the free newspapers around town. I found a venue, which was a brewery, and they had food and drink, and they had a meeting room, but they wanted me to guarantee like $300 or $400 worth of food and drink. So luckily, because we advertised it well enough, a lot of people showed up, and it was a really good success. I started a mailing list with contacts. People give me their email number, email address, and I could contact them about further typewriter events. So we started doing type-ins periodically, several times a year, in library meeting rooms. We have a stationery store, Penny Smith's Papers, that also they were interested, so we do type-ins out on their breezeway in front of their shop. And then around the early 2020s, I met Kevin Kittle as a fellow typewriter collector in Albuquerque, and we started hanging out together. And one night, we were sitting, it was a nice summer night, we were sitting out on the veranda of his house, drinking absinthe and smoking cigars, and we decided, let's start a typewriter group. And so we called ourselves the Albuquerque Typewriter Society. So it's capital ABQ, which is, the abbreviation, QWERTY, so the Q becomes the start of QWERTY, right? And we called it Typewriter Society, 3 separate words, because we were interested in, the machines. Part of the emphasis is we're collectors and we want to keep our machines running, so part of the emphasis is learning to keep the machines running. And then writer is we're interested in gathering people that want to use typewriters to write with. So there's different social circles involved here. Like, traditional collectors of typewriters are guys usually that are older and they just want to collect antiques. They don't even want to use them necessarily. They want to have pretty, cabinets full of antiques, right? That's like the traditional typewriter collector. The newer collectors are, I would classify myself in the latter category, are people that want to use them. They want to have functional typewriters. They want to be like a Jay Leno that can drive the car, not just have a garage full of junkers, right? So we wanted to be able to attract those people, but also I knew from meeting people at Type-ins that there's a lot of people out there that want to write with a typewriter, but they don't want to spend the creative energy to learn how to fix them. So in other words, you can go to a thrift store and buy a typewriter for 50 or $100, and then you have to learn how to service it. Or you have to go take it to a typewriter shop and then wait months and months and months. And so usually if you go the former route, you end up being a collector of typewriters as well as a writer. And the other thing is, but I found people that wanted just to have one or two typewriters. They wanted to write. And so that was the other emphasis about our little society, is we wanted to gather poets and writers and people that wanted to write with typewriters. One of the members that we have is a lady named Waz Flint. She lives in Albuquerque, and she wrote the Distraction-Free First Draft is her book. And she wrote that book on a typewriter. She first drafted it on a Smith Corona Galaxy, basically. Do you have that book there, Bob? There you go.
I do. She wrote it on a Muse machine.
Oh, hey.
Our typewriters.
Yeah, the Distraction-Free First Draft. So Waz is one of our members, and she's a very cool lady. Yeah, she wrote this about first drafting, writing process on a typewriter with a typewriter, which is so cool. And in society, we want to be a society of people, right? So what we currently do with our little typewriter society is we do public typewriter events, maybe 3 or 4 times a year, type-ins. We usually do them at public libraries. I found public libraries are super good places for type-ins because you have the staff are usually very interested, excited, and helpful. In Albuquerque, the library employees are city employees. And so it ties you into the city government in terms of influence. Then we also started doing what we call private meetings. This is not publicly announced, but we have a mailing list. And to our mailing list, we have 2 meetings a month. The first of those is called a type-away. And a type-away happens at a public library. It is an hour of just writing with a typewriter, no conversation. We usually have 15 minutes of socializing, a full hour of just clacking, and then maybe 15 minutes at the end to talk with. And so this is kind of satisfying the need for people to want to use their typewriter to create with, and maybe having the social support of doing so in a room with other people, so they can feel like, oh, I can do this. Other people are doing it. I can actually write for an hour without checking my phone or anything like that. And then the other event we do every month is a typewriter social. And we meet at a local cafe that has food and drink. And the idea is bring your typewriter, food and drink, socialize, have fun, talk, and that satisfies like the social side of the Typewriter Society, right? So we're trying to do those 2 things, help people write and help people socialize with their typewriters. So that's what we're currently doing with our Typewriter Society. We've had, like, our friend Waz was helping me as a communications director and doing like emails and social media, and then she ended up getting a full-time job that took her away from that duty, so now I have another person helping me. So I always like to have an assistant, somebody to help me with that. I don't want it to be like a one-man band where you have a tuba and a violin and a trumpet and a guitar and a banjo all going in circles at once. So I've talked and talked and talked and talked, so I think we'll open it up to Q&A. Anybody have any questions?
I'd like to just make a correction. I don't correct people like Joe often, but we're only at 6 or 8 weeks ourselves here at Muse for a pair.
Oh, good. 6 to 8 weeks. Thank you.
Yeah, we can do about a dozen a week. So.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Lewis in Albuquerque is a one-man show, and he has obviously months and months of backlog. So
Yeah.
that shop is open Monday through Wednesday to the public, and he actually usually comes in on a Thursday, so he'll be sometimes open then. But then he does take work home on the weekend to work. He has a shop at home. So,
Wow.
anyways,
With AB QWERTY,
Yeah.
have you considered doing like a collaborative publication of any sort, like an annual or something? Probably not.
yeah, that's an interesting point. We haven't done printed like zines or anything. Although, okay, I should backtrack. Last year there's a local lady in the Albuquerque area who is really adept at making zines, and we hosted a zine making workshop that she taught for us. So some of you guys, if you're type pals with me and gotten letters, you might have seen me send you a little zine I made about a coffee shop typing zine. And that came out of that workshop. There is a couple guys in Las Cruces, New Mexico, southern New Mexico, that do typewriters. They have a morning street fair in downtown Las Cruces, and with booths, different people, and they sometimes do typewriters there, just have them there, and they try to sell them and whatever. But we went down there, Kevin and I went down there once or twice to support them and meet them, and so we've done a little bit of collaboration that. But yeah, I think it would be fun to think about some kind of maybe written collaboration. Of course, I'm thinking now about Richard Polt's Loose Dog Press, right? Richard Polt being the gentleman who wrote the Typewriter Revolution, right? The classic book. He has published a series of crowdsourced short story collections with typewriters, typewriter writers, people that write with typewriters, who send in their work typewritten, a high quality scan typewritten, and it gets published that way as the actual typed pages. I think I collaborated on the first issue of that. I forget now what that anthology was called, but anyways, I've done that once. So yeah, it would be fun to do that. I haven't really pursued it any further though. But if you have any ideas for that, any more details, we'd love to talk to you about that.
I've been mulling something over. I was thinking for Type Pals, but maybe it'd be even more appropriate for AB QWERTY.
Well, maybe so, but I think it might. I know that, okay, if you guys are members of Type Pals, if you're not, sign up. Once you log into Type Pals with your account name, there's a discussion forum on Type Pals. And in the discussion forum are several different writing projects that are ongoing, right? Can you tell us about some of those writing projects?
Honestly, I haven't checked in on the forums in a while.
Okay. Well, people are doing short stories, and they're doing writing about other topics. Maybe somebody knows. Do you know about Chris?
I offhand.
Okay. Yeah. But anyway, so there are some collaborative, interactive writing and typing projects on the Type House amongst the members, which is kind of cool.
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
So you are, as a typewriter person, what I would consider a 4-quadrant hobbyist.
Oh.
You play with them, you fix them, you can talk about them, you repair them, all the things. You got all the pieces. So I'm curious, where in your evolution, or how many machines does it take for you to decide to add the next phase and open your own shop?
Well, let's see. I'm retired for 3 years. I didn't talk about my professional life in earlier, but when I was in the Navy in the late 70s, I got into closed circuit video on board shipboard. And when I got out of that, I was a civilian consumer electronics repair person, technician working in video. And then I got an opportunity to work for a major semiconductor manufacturer in a chip fab repairing the equipment. I did that for 29 years with a little company called Intel, and I retired 3 years ago from that. But so I had a lot of background in repair and troubleshooting, right? Not the same background that Bob has in being a very intensely skilled mechanic and machinist. Mine was more electronics related, but also working on really small, intricate mechanical things. So that kind of, hey,
Hi, Joe.
good seeing you.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, so when am I going to open up a repair shop? Well, okay, let me describe for you the economic market.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. So this is the world's most well-traveled typewriter person.
Well, not really.
Yeah, I think so. I get postcards from around the world, almost around the world. Anyways, so in Albuquerque we have one professional typewriter shop still open. There is actually another shop that claims they can do daisy wheel typewriters and Selectrics, but usually there's a Selectric technician that works with John Lewis. If you want a Selectric in Albuquerque repaired, he's Steve Marshall. He's a former IBM technician. That he has a lot of old stock parts. In fact, he converted my Selectric 721 to 1.5 line spacing and the express backspace feature that was in the Selectric 2. He installed that in the Selectric 1 because he had the parts to convert it. Anyways, John Lewis is a professional shop, and like any shop, you have the light bill and all that to consider. So it is a shock to a lot of hobbyists just getting into it how expensive a typewriter can be to buy completely serviced or have your service. But if you look at the cost of what does a laptop computer cost nowadays or whatever, it's not that outrageous. But there are people in Albuquerque who want their typewriter serviced and they don't want to wait the time that John Lewis takes or don't want to pay the money. So there was a guy who lived in what we call the East Mountain area. If you drive east of the Sandia Mountains, the community is on the other side of the mountain. He lived out there and he was a hobbyist, but he learned to service typewriters well enough, and people came to know him and said he could kind of clean and service for people that were strictly wanting to spend their energy writing and not wanting to know how to service anything on your machine. Like an analogy would be, if you don't want to change the oil in your car or learn how to do it, you have to take it to somebody, right, to do that. So he was kind of the equivalent of that. He wasn't the most skilled typewriter tech, but he charged much less to service a typewriter to get it basically serviceable. So there is that business model of, and it may not apply to every community, but in our community, when John Lewis eventually retires, which is really gated by whether or not he sells the building or not, if somebody buys it, he'll probably be working out of his house. But so there could be, and this is a roundabout way of answering your question, Chris, but there could be, an opportunity for, I'm already like, when people in our little society, somebody has a machine that needs to be cleaned or whatever, has a little minor problem that I'm pretty confident I can fix, I'll sometimes take it and work on it myself, But it's not like I'm trying to go into a career with typewriter repair, but it's just, you get the fourth or fifth corner of that piece of that hobby is you get dragged into somebody else, a friend of yours needs their typewriter looked at, and okay, I can do that maybe, and then you get a little more confidence and experience. Okay, maybe I can do that, and then. But my goal is not really to be a typewriter repair person, but I might make it a little bit more purposeful hobby to try to help address other people's problems too.
It's kind of like grandma has a computer problem, so she calls you.
Right.
Oh, you know computers.
Right.
Well, I'm curious too, because I've been debating doing one in LA.
Oh yeah.
Doing like a mini repair shop. You get a dusty old barn machine. Let's all get together.
Yeah.
I've got some materials and tools and things, and we can all kind of learn, or you get a crash course in how to flush a typewriter out,
right.
And at least get it better than limping along.
Right. Yeah, you could do like a workshop for people if they're interested in learning.
But it's the finding enough people who really want to do that.
Well, that's just it, right? You have this Venn diagram with several different interests. People that have typewriters. People that have typewriters that need work, people that, have the confidence or whatever want to learn how to work on them, and then you have that overlap.
And then are they all available on Saturday afternoon?
Yes, exactly. Right. Yeah. So, any other questions?
Do you have writing slumps?
Writing
Slumps.
Where
you can't think of anything to write.
I do occasionally, but I do have an ongoing correspondence with a number of people in the U.S. and around the world. my current list is probably 25 or 30 letters, maybe about 25 letters that are, and I think they date back to March of this year. My goal was to let a letter sit at least a month before I answer it. Now that sounds like purposefully obfuscating the writing process, but really it's because there's a few people on my list that if I got a letter from them and I wrote the same week, they would write the next week back.
Yeah.
And I don't know these people well enough to have that frequent of a correspondence with them, right? So I kind of make it a policy just to wait a month for anything. But then it also means that, I start getting letters piling up, and it happened to be that I was recovering from my hip surgery in that springtime, and I wasn't, I got distracted and probably doing a lot of videos instead of thinking about letter writing. But I would say my letter writing slump comes and goes also. So yeah, they build up. In fact, I brought my Hermes 3000 out on this trip. I have the middle body style, and I did get one letter written. Although it's not going to get mailed until I go back home. But yeah, at least I got a letter written. So maybe.
She smiles like you did that late last night. Past bedtime.
Well, I had it I've been typing on half-size sheets of paper as a way to. I'm sort of making homemade envelopes that are size so you can either fold a letter-size sheet into quarters or a half-size sheet into half. And I like typing on half-size sheets because I have a few people that writes 5 pages single spaced with very narrow margins, and then I'll do 2 of my little half sheets. At least I can say they're 2 sheets, even though they're really 1 sheet because it's 2 half sheets. But it's my psychology of wanting to think I'm writing more than I am. Now, some people are actually much more conversational with their writing. They're literally typing the way they're thinking and talking to somebody, so they get a lot more wordy, and then you learn about their, they're not taking the vacation to Florida this year, and they're, for whatever reason, you learn all this stuff about their lives that you don't really necessarily want to know, but that's part of the fun of, having a correspondence with people you don't really know, or whatever, so.
And you don't get that on Twitter.
You don't get that on Twitter. That's right. Or X or whatever they call it now. Yeah. So the writing process, right? Yeah. I think like any writer, I think of Stephen King's book on writing. It's probably his best book. It's not fiction. It's a book about writing, right? And he talks about if you want to be a writer, you'll find time to write. Even if you're working 2 jobs and you have to sit in a closet at 2 in the morning and write or whatever, you'll figure out time to write. I don't know if I'm that motivated of a writer. I do have a series of short stories I've written that I've sort of self-published with just getting books made on Blurb, but I'm sort of working on another extension to that story that's going to be a novel, but I haven't made good progress. And I think part of the reason why that is because as a YouTube creator, I also have this sense of obligation to be able to want to put a video out every week to maintain an audience, and yeah, my channel is monetized and I get enough money to eventually in 6 months maybe buy another camera lens or a microphone or something. It's just a hobby that monetizes itself. It's not like you can live on that kind of income, but I think that creative energy that it takes to do videos every week and to maintain a blog does take away from being a writer at times. It's like how much of a Renaissance man can you be? How many irons in the fire? How many different ways can you express yourself? Right? How much energy do you have? So that's always an interesting question. So, yes.
Do you have a typewriter that you let go of that you wish you hadn't?
Oh, that's a great question.
Or saw and did not attain? Or both?
In my collecting time, I had 3 Olivetti Lettera 22s. And this was early on when I wasn't skilled or confident about servicing them. 2 of the 3 skipped chronically, which is a common problem with them. So the one that didn't skip had a British keyboard. I don't. That had nothing to do with it, but I gave one away and sold the other two. Now I regret. I wish I had a letter of 22, only because I think I have a pretty good collection of small typewriters representing most of the good brands, but I don't have a letter of 22 right now. I don't think I like the 32 as much as the 22. I like the 22 better. Answering your question, I had a Remington made in Holland, and I can't remember. I had the 1040, which I sold to a friend, and I had a love-hate relationship with it. It was actually parts of it I really loved. I liked the fact that it had 5 line spacing settings. I liked the typing action. It was full featured, with tabs and everything. Anyway, somebody wanted it. I sold it to them. But I had the other Remington, the bigger one. And the ones that are made in Holland, they have those kind of squarish keys that look like chiclets, chewing gum, right? They have that chiclet shape. I regret getting rid of that machine. I can't remember what it was called.
Portable?
Yeah, but it was slightly larger than the 1040, right?
Was it was the heavy metal frame or the cheaper chassis?
Yeah, the heavy
later?
metal frame, yeah. Nice, and I think the ribbon cover was cast metal instead of stamped sheet metal. It had that nice ringy sound to it, I think I regret the Olivetti, getting rid of it. Oh, when I told you my story of first getting into the typewriter thing, I said I bought a Royal Mercury at the start. That's not really true. I bought an Adler from John Lewis, and I was so young to the typewriter thing, I don't even know what model. It was a J something, right? I don't know if it was a J2 or J3 or 4. And at the time, I just didn't my hands weren't really suited to a manual typewriter at the time. And they probably had a little bit heavier of a touch than what I liked. So after a year or so, I took it back and then basically bought a Mercury. And that's how it started. But nowadays, I have a J3. I love it. It's one of my favorite typewriters. It has a slightly wider keyboard. Like if you measure from it's hard to tell where the center of the key is, but if you measure from one of the edges of the key to the other side, the other edge, measure that like the main row, maybe the QWERTY row or whatever, and you compare it to 2 different machines, you'll find that like compared to an SM9 or SM4 Olympia, the Adler is just a few millimeters wider, and it doesn't sound like much, but actually it makes a huge difference in how it feels. A little bit less crowding of the keyboard makes a huge difference for me. So I like the touch on the Adler. I like that machine, even though the body is plastic and it has that horrid case design where the 2 rubber grommets expand in the holes to hold it. That never works right. I'm going to engineer a design to fix that, I think, maybe. But anyways, I like the Adler. I'm sort of bypassing your main question. Do I have any other machines I regret selling? John Lewis had a reconditioned Underwood 5 at his shop a few years ago. That was absolutely museum grade, beautiful, perfect. It had the black lacquer was perfect. All the decals were perfect. He had put on new legends on all the keys. It was a gorgeous typewriter. And when I was working for Intel, I joke about Intel bought me typewriters. We had this recognition system to recognize good behavior for safety and other things. And they had a little credit card and a debit card, and if you get a recognition, you either get 10 or 20 bucks credited to your card. I would save those up and go in and buy a typewriter. Like that Hermes 3000 I got right there in the hotel it was bought for me. It was maybe $600 right? It's a Hermes 3000. Yeah, Intel bought that for me, which is very funny.
Better than a gold watch.
Better than a gold watch, and I'm reminded of Steve Jobs' memo that came out in the early 80s about we're no longer going to be using typewriters in this company. Remember that?
Yeah.
I think it was funny.
That's pretty good.
So I do regret that this is this sounds funny, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm ungrateful, but before I had a chance to buy that beautiful Underwood, I had gone to one of the Phoenix Type-ins, and Ted Monk gave me his Underwood 5.
Aww.
Which but now I didn't have any room for another standard typewriter, because standard typewriters take room, right? That you can't just easily store them in the closet. You have to have a table space that's dedicated for that typewriter. So I didn't have room for the gorgeous typewriter that Intel was going to buy me. So that's what I regret, not getting that Underwood 5.
You could have had both.
I could have had both, I know. No. See, the voice of reason is there, you know.
I think Ted gave me all his large typewriters when he moved,
Oh, did he? Yeah.
so I have to haul them around.
Oh, yes. Well, yeah, he had some good models, though. Yeah.
So you said something interesting that I have not heard before that I think is probably a common question, because I see at least once or twice a month. I have big hands, I have small hands.
Oh, yes.
Which typewriter should I use? But you said when you started out, your hands were not,
Yeah.
I don't know what the quote was, but like
Right.
they weren't typewriter
They weren't
ready.
typewriter ready.
And
Yes.
obviously they are now.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Talk about the
I will.
philosophy of that
Oh, yeah.
QWERTY distinction. QWERTY distinction.
QWERTY distinction. So, you know, when I took typing class in the early 70s, it was electric type bar machines. And the popular girls got Selectrics, you know, up front. the ones going to college, and they were the teacher's pet. And I'm not bitter about it much, but anyways, but not anymore. But, you know, yeah, so I did not learn on a manual typewriter, right? And I was typing on Selectrics and daisy wheel machines in the 80s and all that. So we recently brought typewriters just 2 weeks ago to AFTACON 26. Americans for the Arts is a national arts organization. They had their annual convention in Albuquerque for the first time. They invited us to come. And I'm going to answer your question by continuing an answer from a previous question, which is when we started doing type-ins in public libraries in Albuquerque, then because the library staff were city employees, the Albuquerque Museum, which is run by the city, got a hold of us last summer that they wanted us to bring typewriters to they were doing this third Thursday of the month evening open house event every month. And we brought a dozen typewriters to the museum, literally hundreds of people, continuous line of people using our typewriters all evening. We did that again in December. And then because of that, when this AFTACON, Americans for the Arts Convention, was planning their convention in Albuquerque, and they got a hold of the city arts and culture department, they gave our name as one of the vendors to do like a maker space with interactive art stuff. So in the process of doing this and working with people, I tell people who never use, the first thing I do is I ask them, have you ever used a typewriter before? He goes, no. Okay. I say, the typewriter key needs to be pressed down about 3/4 of an inch, not like a little chiclet key on a laptop keyboard. You have to do it quick and fast and hard and release it quickly. And all 8 fingers plus the space bar have to be done the same way, including these little weakling fingers. And so my advice is to, starting out, and this is not what typing teachers told us in the 1960s or 70s or 80s, because they wanted you to be a secretary. I tell people, just use your index fingers to start with, because those are the strongest fingers, and you can have a satisfying typing experience at the very start. And then, if you want to learn how to be a touch typist with a manual typewriter, you can start training yourself to do that. Now, continuing that answer, I should say that my left pinky has a slight kink in it. And one of the things I tend to do as a result is when I'm touch typing and I'm typing the letter A, I tend to roll my hand a little bit to type the letter A. And what that tends to do is it tends to cock the pinky finger off to the side, and I end up bumping the shift lock. And so in English, the letter A is the third most frequent letter typed. And if you're right-handed, it's being typed with the weakest finger of your weakest hand. So if you've ever noticed this at type-ins, why so many people mishit the letter A, that's why. They're trying to touch type, they're right-handed, and they're the third most frequent letter, right? So anyways, I noticed that different keyboards work differently. Like, for instance, the KMM is a wonderful typewriter for that, because the shift lock is halfway up between the A and the Q, the QWERTY row. And so I don't hit it at all. The typewriter that's the worst for it in my collection is the SM9. The SM9 has a segment shift. It's a very light shift. You barely touch the shift lock and it'll drop the segment a little bit. And it's very close to the A key. And so that machine, I hit it and I have a misprinted A dropped below the line all the time. So what I started doing, and you've probably seen it on that guy's channel back there, Joe Van Cleef's channel, you've probably seen me talk about, I have this technique called weird typing. And weird typing was one way that I tried to address this need to want to do pseudo touch typing for speed and efficiency, but also addressing the fact that my left hand was kind of weird and couldn't really type the A very well. And that's what I do is I kind of pseudo touch type with my right hand, and I'll hunt peck with my left index finger. And that actually turns out to be pretty good, pretty efficient for not making mistakes. And I know in typing class they always discounted 5 words per minute for every mistake you made. But I think it's actually more than that. If you figure the amount of time it takes you to stop, grab a correction tab, get it, okay, if you have a correction tab that's partly used, you're like, well, let's see, then I gotta fit it in behind the ribbon, and oops, doesn't fit, and then you get part of the tab that's halfway used, and then it didn't quite erase it all, so then you have to backspace, and then you get the other part of the tab, and then, so by the time you do all that, you got more than 5 words you could have typed, right? so that, which brings to mind another topic is, should we do corrections at all? We'll talk about that maybe in a little bit, but so I was doing weird typing, but I think if you want to learn to touch type on a typewriter, you have to kind of purposefully work at it. And there are those old typing instruction books that are available, and I recommend getting one of those, and you can work at it. You don't necessarily, so there are variations in touch typing. Like, for instance, you're supposed to be able to touch type the number keys effortlessly if you're a true touch typist without looking at the keyboard. But you could be a pseudo touch typist and not learn the number keys, because you're not going to type the numbers that much. It's really the letters, right? So, I would give a person a break there, because that's one of the beauties of the post-typewriter era, is typewriters aren't being used in the business world for what they were created for initially. So we can do all these weird things with them now, like type on aluminum foil, and we can, and we can use this kind of a typing method or whatever you want to use, right? So that's the beauty of it. As to whether or not you should correct, we've had discussions about this a lot, and I tend to be self-conscious about my letters, especially my writing letters, especially, and it's just me, but especially to people overseas. I noticed people in Europe, like Germany, they tend to be a little more very neat and orderly, perfect letters, perfect imprint. You can't tell there was ever a correction. The paper quality is beautiful, and then you feel like an American. I hate to say it. When you slap out a freaking error-filled thing on a piece of newsprint paper or something, then you feel self-conscious, like maybe you're misrepresenting your country, but maybe that's not possible these days. But anyways, you feel like I feel like I'm a little more self-conscious when I'm typing a letter to somebody, especially overseas. And so I try to, usually it's 2-finger typing, because then you want to be neater. You don't want to make a mistake, right? And which gets us to the thing about, if you look at these old black and white photos or films from the typewriter era, and the classic one I think of is there's these pictures and films recorded at like Yankee Stadium. And there's a whole row of sports writers, and they're in their overcoats and their fedoras, and they have a cigar and they have a typewriter, and they're all two-finger typing. And it's not because they don't know how to touch type. It's they can't afford to make a mistake, because that piece of paper is going to be sent by wire service back to the home office. And there's going to be some guy that's going to convert it into type and put it on a press, and you can't have a mistake. You can't afford a mistake, right? So, so even though in typing class we were told to learn how to touch type, people that worked for a living a lot of times had to worry about mistakes more than typing speed. So, and so should you correct though? Well, I prefer a lot of the paper I like typing on is off-white, like cream colored papers and newsprint. And all the modern correction methods with tabs and correction tape cartridges, it's going to leave a big bright white blotch, which is even more unsightful than just leaving the error. So, you can cover it up with a strike through. I mean, the classic one is the /, but the / is a tall character. It actually makes the error stand out a little bit more, and so maybe a pound symbol is kind of good, or even just a hyphen or dash, or just
Tom Hanks it and just
and move on, or it could be an extraneous letter that you didn't want in there, like an extra letter, but if it's just the wrong letter, you can just overtype it, right? Then you have that little double print look, and people know what it means. You've seen this thing before where I think it's on t-shirts and things, but it's some phrase, and it's each word begins with the first letter, but the other letters are jumbled. But you can read the sentence, you can read the phrase anyway, because your mind can put it together, and that's kind of the way it is with overtyped, sloppy typing. It's legible usually, right? So the big thing is whether or not when you send somebody a letter like that, are you communicating to them that they're not worth retyping the letter? I mean, is it like a personal assault on somebody or an affront to them, right? I don't know. That's a good question.
So you're not pulling out the eraser shield, moving the character all the way out,
No.
using that hard eraser.
My friend Kevin loves to do that, and I'm like, I don't like harassable paper also, the so-called erasable typing papers, because the ink doesn't print very dark and it smudges easy, right? So yeah, I will try to be as neat as I possibly can, and I will sometimes use correction tabs, and it usually works okay. But correction tabs is a little neater than correction tape, because in theory the tab only puts white mark on where the mistaken letter was, instead of making a big rectangular blotch over the whole paper,
As long as it wasn't that A on your essay.
As long as it wasn't the A, and that's the problem, is you can't reproduce that dropped effect very accurately,
And cleaning out the whiteout is not fun.
No.
We know that from rehabbing typewriters,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. I remember I have this Olympia Reporter electric typewriter that's made by Nakajima, and it was built for correction ribbon that had black on top and white on the bottom, because there's the color selector. Well, it has actually a correction button, and all the correction button do is it manually raises the vibrator to the white position, right? I use it for red, but yeah. So there were typewriters built for that, and it's terrible, right? And you get all that white stuff caked in there. It doesn't even blow out. You have to physically scrub it out, right? Yeah.
Nightmares.
It's a lot of work.
Okay.
Oh, if I may, the next 5 years. That was my question. What do you see happening in the next 5 years in the world of typewriting?
The next 5 years. Okay. That's a good. I'm at 2% batteries. Still running. Yeah. The next 5 years. So one thing that happened a few weeks ago that we found out is the lady that ran Baco Ribbon and Supply passed away. So that business is out of business. So as far as I know, the only other business where you can buy bulk ribbons is from Fine Line, right? Now, Baco was selling 330-yard spools, and Fine Line only sells 660-yard spools. And if you're a hobbyist with a number of typewriters, you know, it's still workable. Like, I have a Baco spool that's getting down there. I'm going to have to probably buy another, but a bigger sized spool this time. And there's also places like Ribbons Unlimited that Lonnie does a good job. He's easy to work with. He'll make custom ribbons or ribbons in custom cassettes. Like, he'll reload for a Selectric 1 with the cloth cartridge. He'll reload whatever ribbon you want in one of those things, right? He's really helpful. But it got me thinking, and this is the topic of a video that's in the process of being made. When I get back to Albuquerque, I'll probably put it out. But I've been thinking about what happens if a ribbon apocalypse happens and we don't have any more ribbons, right? Well, I've been interested in that question, and what I've been toying with is carbon paper. And that was the last of the video that my little camera recorded before the batteries completely died. That was most of the talk. But if you want to see the rest of the video, I'll leave a link down below to the video that Gregory Short recorded and posted to TypePal's website. But in the meantime, I want to thank again the staff and proprietor Bob Marshall of Typewriter Muse for all the people that participated in that talk. It was very fun for me to do. And as always, stay creative and have yourselves a great day. Bye-bye for now.